Let's talk about Arsenal, shall we?
Oh.
We haven't spoken about them for
Well, he's not going there, Harry Kane.
These are the backstories. Laughing stock Wenger out. Shame old story. This was the protest before the game.
We want Wenger out, say we want Wenger out. We want Wenger out, say we want Wenger out. We want Wenger out, say we want Wenger out.
What needs to change at this club? What do you mean by that? I think this club is in a great shape. That is at the moment going through a very difficult situation. But so what needs to change is result in the next game.
Stevie, we didn't get to hear your view on what we saw yesterday. Indeed, those comments there from Wenger that the club's in a fine state.
Listen, I'm not an Arsenal fan, but I felt embarrassed for them. I mean, this was just embarrassing. You know, it's one thing for Wenger to cling on to his job by winning the odd cup now and again, getting them in the top four, getting knocked out in the round of 16, whether it's unfortunate or it's tight, but they're not going to finish in the top four. I can't see them winning a cup, and this absolute embarrassment should be the nail in Wenger's coffin. You know, he should do the right thing. He should be the one that comes out and says, you know what, I've not moved this club forward. Right now, it's definitely backwards. No question. I should probably go. But
everything he seems to say after the game, and indeed in press conferences previous, seemed that he's nowhere near at that stage.
We don't want to see protests, but it happens at clubs, and supporters have a right to voice their opinion. They pay the money. They support the club through thick and thin. But he's killing his own legacy here. He's killing his own great work from the early days by just clinging on, and he's only making it worse for himself.
No, it was funny watching that game against Bayern Munich is that when the game got out of hand, then all of a sudden it's like people had in their back pocket or perhaps in the, oh, hold on a second, let me get, okay, wait a minute, I got it.
Oh, is it there?
Well, no, not quite.
I thought you pre-prepared.
Well, no, I don't, not quite, but that's why it's like,
Dan
okay,
Thomas
and then he put it back in, it's like, all right, we're done. Are we done protesting? Yeah, okay, we're done. Let's move ahead, and let's wait until next year. And it's lukewarm, this protest, and it doesn't feel like it carries any momentum. And then what if they finish in the top four? What if they do just enough? And then it's going to be up to him. And if it's up to him, he's going to stay.
I'll tell you what, whoever comes in after him when he does eventually go, if it is at the start of next year, Wenger hasn't done them any favours. For the last 3 or 4 seasons, we've been talking about how they need to make a couple of major signings to get them over that hump of winning a big prize. This team needs overhauled. So, as if it wasn't going to be hard enough to follow in Wenger's footsteps, tell you what, good luck to whoever has to.
I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, Dan, I could understand, to a certain extent, Wenger's mindset, thinking, I'll give it another year.
Yeah.
I can make it happen, I'll give it another year. But that was 2, 3, 4 years ago, and we're actually in a worse situation. So I think from his own perspective, he surely has to see that the end is nigh.
This is not the world's worst Proclaimers tribute band. It's Stevie Nicol, the European Cup winner, myself, Mark Donaldson, talking Arsenal. It's the only topic that everyone seems to be talking about right now. I want to talk about Alexis Sanchez in particular. Was he right to show his frustration? This whole, according to Robert Pires, who was at training, he walked off after a bad tackle. Is that the type of thing that a professional should do at training?
I think we'd all rather not see that. But I think there are certain times when you have to show your frustration. There are certain ways of doing it. I wouldn't suggest that was one of the ways of doing it.
Right.
But I think when you get in a situation that Arsenal are in right now, then something has to be done. And if it takes a player to show that frustration and make a difference, then I don't have a problem with it.
Everything right now Arsenal's magnified because of the issues that they have. Whether he's on the bench, sniggering, doing whatever. I want to take you back to your time as a coach. How do you deal with your best player maybe going slightly AWOL and off message?
You have to deal with it swiftly and be real strong and assured in the decision you make.
So would you have dropped him for the next game and left him on the bench, okay, like Wenger did at Anfield?
Well, I actually had a player who I suspended for 2 weeks from training.
Your best player?
Arguably.
Okay.
And there was an international week the following week. I called up Bruce Arena, who was the manager at the time, and asked him if it was possible to back me up and not let this player join the squad. And he was fantastic. He said, yes, I agree with you, after explaining what happened. And when the player came back, it was as though nothing had happened. You know, the other players took on board what happened. They saw me dealing with it swiftly. They saw me being strong. The player himself knew he was out of order, apologised, and it was as though nothing had happened. So when you're going to deal with a problem, you have to be strong and you have to be swift. And if you do that, then everybody takes it on board.
So has this now gone too far? Because Wenger didn't do that. He did it for one game. He then made up some excuse saying, oh, I wanted to try something different. And then he brought him back in the Champions League.
Matt, that's the problem. He didn't do it for one game. The player played in the game.
Correct.
Sanchez played. You either do it or you don't. He, as Shaka Hislop said during the week, he went halfway.
Yep.
And that tells the rest of the players that he's not sure, that he's not strong.
So how does Wenger retrieve this situation with Sanchez? Because right now, everybody's thinking to themselves, well, if I do the same, then I might miss half a game.
I don't think he does retrieve the situation. I think it's gone too far. The team itself is in such disarray that it just adds on to everything else that's going on.
So what happens next? What's the end game here now that this has happened?
One goes.
Who?
Well, usually the player goes. In this situation, it seems as though most people are siding with Sanchez.
Yeah, because right now he's more important to Arsenal. If they get a new coach in and keep Sanchez, Arsenal fans, most of them would probably be happy with this.
Yeah, listen, look at the other side of London and Chelsea. Who went? It wasn't the players that went.
Nope.
Jose Mourinho went. And I think eventually, we've reached that point that Arsene Wenger has to go and will go. If he has any real pride, because he has to see what this team is now. This isn't Invincibles. Mm-hmm. This isn't a team that are competitive as far as winning the Premier League. It's a team that doesn't look as though it's going to be in the top four. Time to go.
There's been a lot of talk over the last 2-3 years about the future of Arsene Wenger. Maybe this Alexis Sanchez situation is finally the straw that broke the camel's back. Oh, we live in this society. Who's best? Is it X or Y? Was Nicol a better player than Burley? Well, that's an obvious question. We're now comparing apples and oranges here. Who is better, Kante or Hazard? And it's difficult to do. The problem is, when you choose Player of the Year, you have to decide, is a goalkeeper better than a striker, or is a midfielder better than whoever? Eden Hazard or N'Golo Kante? Who's more important to Chelsea? It's a tough one.
If I'm picking a team tomorrow...
Who's your first name on the team sheet, Hazard or Kante?
Hazard. Listen, the game's about scoring goals. Okay. It's about making a difference up that end of the field. N'Golo Kante has been sensational in his, 18 months so far in the Premier League?
Yep.
But it's easier to destroy than it is to create. And Eden Hazard, boy, when he's on fire, can he create? Not just scoring goals, but assists. I mean, why do you think Costa has 17 goals this season? It's not a fluke. It's not. He doesn't do it on his own. He does it because Eden Hazard, more times than not, is the boy who supplies him.
Look, the reason I'm laughing is because I read your book, and in your book I found out that you were the Player of the Year in the late 80s. You were more of a destroyer than a creator. Have you just ruined your own argument there?
No, I'm a freak of nature, aren't
I? But what I'm saying here, we're going to look at this graphic about Eden Hazard. We can argue till the cows come home who's more important. They've both had an exceptional season, and we shouldn't have to have X is better than Y. But in this, we do, because we've got to choose a Player of the Year. Hazard last year was rubbish. He downed tools. They all did. Chelsea.
It's Player of the Year.
No, correct.
Player of this year, not last year.
Correct. Exactly. I've got no problem if he's named Player of the Year. I think when we look at the stats from 2 years ago when he was the PFA Player of the Year, he's on par with that. And if he wins it, he's been great, because Chelsea are going to win the league, and he's been exceptional. Are you therefore saying that someone like N'Golo Kante, despite being important to the team, should never be considered for Player of the Year because he's
I'm not saying that. You're saying that.
What are you saying?
I'm saying that if you have somebody who's been so exceptional, and the two of them have been exceptional.
Yep.
then it goes back to the real basic argument of which one in the modern game, well, in any period in history in the game, which one's easier? It's easier to defend than it is to be creative. And so if it comes down to the both of them being sensational, that's the criteria of which I'm going to pick Hazard.
It just brings into question, doesn't it? Because I've got no problem with you picking Hazard. I'd probably pick him as well, and Kanté would be up there. But it brings into question, what was going on at Chelsea last year? Why was so many of them able to down tools?
Well, you'd have to say that there was problems between the player and the players and the manager. And at the end of the day, when you're a player and you step on the field, you know, you're playing for a lot of reasons. You're playing for your club, you're playing for your fans, you know. But ultimately as well, you're playing for the guy who's in charge, the guy who tells you what to do, the guy who, when you're down, builds you up, the guy who, when you get too far up, when you get too big time, knocks you down. You know, the manager is so important to every team. It shouldn't be underestimated. And so when a whole team is alienated either by the manager or from the manager, then you get what happened to Chelsea last year, and that's a team that just isn't up for it.
We probably would both give the Player of the Year to Eden Hazard. Certainly commended N'Golo Kanté. What do you think? ESPN FC on Twitter, and let us know your thoughts.